Mr. Martin, Mr. Flaherty says that the global slowdown is going to push back the deficit target a bit. Any thoughts on that?
Well, there's no doubt that we're going to be affected by what's going on outside our border. And I think what's very important is that Canada, on the basis of its policies, essentially allows us Canadians to take advantage of the fact that interest rates are very low. There's an absolute necessity of bringing down unemployment, and that we're going to have the kinds of aggressive investment policies in the economy that are going to enable us to come through what is a global slowdown. And I think the global slowdown, we understand it's for the reasons that Frank gave. I wonder if I could just pick up on something that Frank said. When I was an opposition MP, it was really the government of Frank McKenna that set the tone for the whole country. His ability to communicate his policies, but his ability to develop them to begin with, was absolutely essential for New Brunswick, but it was also a model for an awful lot of us. So I just really want to say, for me, it's pretty exciting to be here. This center, named after Frank, who was really an example for so many of us, especially before we went into government and were able to learn.
Fiscal rectitude, I find, is not a big selling feature in any government, but it's what you got to do, isn't it?
And people understand. People understand the necessity for fiscal rectitude as long as you explain why it's important to them. And that's what you do. That's what we do.
I'm just going to take a minute and we'll get back to your question. But I think it's important people connect the dots, because this will happen in the United States as well. And in Canada, through a combination of spending reductions and some small revenue increases, we're able to lower the debt, lower our interest rates, lower our borrowing costs, create more economic activity, which created a bigger tax base, which resulted in the ability to pay down some of the debt, lowering our service costs, creating more revenue, able to reinvest in social programs, able to start a declining tax rate that made the country more competitive. It's a virtuous circle. If you can get it going right, that Europe and the United States now just desperately are looking to try to emulate.
Yeah, I think, let me just pick up on that. The vicious circle, which you find so many of the European countries in, is a lack of confidence that arises from governments which are not able to deal with their issues. And part of that is governments which can't deal with them because they can't communicate to their people why it's necessary to deal with it. If a government then is able to get the people on side, which is what Frank was able to do and we were able to do, what you start to do is to build up confidence. At that level, interest rates start to drop, the economy starts to pick up, and you get very much into what they call the virtuous circle. That's what we did in the 90s.
And got reelected.
Yes, absolutely. That was never...
Which is a bonus.
But here you're in a province right now where unemployment is over 10% and the prospects are not well. People are leaving for the West. What do you have to say about this debate between the East and the West in Canada? What can be done?
Well, the fact is that Western Canada has this huge storehouse of natural resources. It's obviously very important for the country as a whole. What has to be done in Eastern Canada is to invest in the newer economy. That is, I'll go back to it. I remember when Frank was talking about investing in the newer economy for New Brunswick. And I think it really is those are the kinds of policies that you've got to hear coming out of the framers really in Central and Eastern Canada.
I've always felt that the knowledge economy was what we had to invest in to distinguish ourselves. There are countries around the world, highly successful economies that are not resource-based, that do very well as a result of their intellectual capital. A mini economy is Massachusetts. People talk about it a lot. They really don't have any natural resources. You never hear of drilling or mining or so on in Massachusetts. But their oil derricks are in their universities. That's created enormous wealth for them. But having said that, I would just want to say something New Brunswick specific. I don't think we should ever beggar thy neighbor and be unhappy because the rest of Canada is doing well. But we can feed off of that. Right now, there is an opportunity for a serendipitous result in Canada that's good for the West and the East, and that is by creating an Eastern access to the oil product from the West. It will improve the cost to the Western producers, and it will give oil to Eastern Canada at a cost cheaper than global prices. And it will allow us to build some of that infrastructure that's creating so many jobs in the West. This can be a big win-win if we can get a pipeline all the way from Western Canada right to St. John, New Brunswick to Tidal Water.